Today's question comes from Drew in Austin. He writes, I hear you guys on the show talk about being, quote, house poor and not spending more than 25% of your take-home pay on your mortgage payment. Can you explain more of what house poor means and what's bad about it? In today's real estate market, that is tough to do with high home prices, higher interest rates, etc. What is the harm of paying 30 to 35% if that's what it takes to get into a house these days, especially since it is only going to appreciate in value? Well, this is interesting. It's a good question, number one. The idea of the house appreciating in value doesn't change the numbers of you have this much income and this much of your world is being taken up by that house payment. And so that's what being house poor comes down to. You don't have enough money left over to do all the other things like fund college, fund retirement, go on vacation, upgrade the car, cover the emergencies. And so being house poor just means that you have too much of your world wrapped up in that mortgage payment, and that's too many Americans today.
There's a reason that people have a car payment if they have a 35% of their income going to house payment. They don't have room in their budget to save up and pay for a car, so they go into debt. So house poor means I borrowed so much on my house that I end up borrowing on other things. Oh, and my kids in the future, they'll have student loans because I didn't save for their school. Oh, and anything I get ready to do that I don't have room, as George said, economists call the room in your budget, the margin in your budget, your disposable income, the income you have for saving and for investing and for enjoying. And if after your debt payments you don't have any disposable income, any margin left, any wiggle room left in your budget, you're going to end up in our society going into debt. And so, Drew, let me tell you one other thing. I appreciate your call or your email. In today's real estate market, it's tough to do with high home prices, higher interest rates. That is a phrase I have heard since I went on the air in 1992. Every year, someone says, but Dave, I live in California and we don't use math here. Dave, I live in New York and math doesn't count here because it's so expensive that we don't have to follow mathematical facts. We can just borrow and say, oh, it's expensive to live here. Oh, interest rates are high and I want a house. And so, but the downstream result of that is that you're going to find yourself lacking in investments and lacking in kids' college funds, as George said, and lacking in money for emergencies. So everything that happens in your life is a potential new debt because you went so far in debt in the name of getting a house because you rationalized and said, well, the world has never been like this. Well, honey, the world has always been like this. I'm old and it's always been like this. House prices have, when my parents bought their first home in 1962, $12,250 big dollars.
You can't buy a used car for that much these days.
3.25% interest rate. And you know what they got? A 30. My grandfather had a fit. You're going to be in debt for 30. Have you lost your 30-year mind? Old people back then thought you were sinning if you went that far in debt.
Well, you're buying a coffin at that point.
Yeah.
30 years is a long
30
time.
years. You're going to be in debt your whole life. What's wrong with you people?
Well,
that
now
was
we're so
the
used to
reaction of the generation before my parents, right?
Yeah.
But they signed up for 30 years at $12,000. And, man, I mean, my first apartment rent was $235 a month.
Wow.
You can't even, what?
You'd have to get 9 roommates to do that
You can't
today.
cross the threshold for that.
That's unbelievable.
They won't even let you go look at an apartment.
Yeah.
You know, but it didn't matter. In those days, my pay was different. And guess what? The overall the cost of goods was different. Gasoline was $1.26, okay, when that rent was there. So it's all relative and ratios. And so not picking on you and giving you the old boomer line here. You just don't understand, youngin'. But you just don't understand, youngin'. It's always been this way. It's always been high.
Yeah.
And you always have to make a decision to say no so later you can say yes. Live like no one else so that later you can live and give like no one else.